Hello again on this Monday, a new week. Has much changed? Well, it's not changed for the better. We know that. We know that by watching the news, and the best thing that we can do is sequester ourselves away from others and hope not to spread this virus any further as we move, hopefully, from the trough to the peak and back down again on those curves that they're showing us on the news. But as we do that, as we live in the midst of that, to think about the things that we're going to miss. We all have things that we're missing during this time, and I would guess that almost all of us, before this is done, will miss an important meal. Not just breakfast or lunch or dinner, supper, whatever you might call it, but a special meal, maybe a birthday meal together as a family, maybe, certainly Easter is a meal that we might not be able to have together. I don't think that our kids and grandkids will come from Minneapolis this Easter, so we won't be together when we're celebrating that. That's a meal that we'll miss together. But the meal that I'm thinking about right now that I missed maybe 10 days ago now, we heard that the last of the oldest generation in my family passed away, Esther Stavi. And the first thing when my brother told me about it was, well, I need to know when the funeral is. I want to try to get to that funeral. I want to be able to visit with that family and reminisce with her children, with Karen, her oldest, who would write my mother silly letters about the everyday things that she was doing when my mom was at home with hospice just before she died. And she'd get those letters and they would cheer up and they'd say, Karen, thank you for writing those letters. I remember that about you. Or talk to Paul about the times that we would go hunting together with our kids when they were in high school and junior high, and the good times that was with them. And Susan, who I rode bus with every day to school, and we would talk and reminisce each day about, or I'd reminisce with her about what we talked about, the things we teased each other about, the silly things that were going on in our lives back then when we were taking that bus back and forth to school. We would have done that probably after the funeral service at a meal. Very simple meal, and it's not the foods that are served at that meal, but it's the fellowship time, the remembrance, remembering the past, remembering the person who has passed away, remembering all those things and bringing them up and talking about that. That's the things I miss about not being able to be there, not being able to have more than 10 people at those funerals. We lack. What do we lack? Something very important, right? So we'll all probably miss some type of meal because of that, and we either have already or in the coming weeks to come to think about that. Those meals give us memories, but also give us an opportunity to gather together and share memories. And to think about that today, the things that I have on the table might seem kind of odd. This is exactly where there's a line right here, and that's where this wine will stay until we have communion again. I'm not partaking of it just because I'm being sequestered, tempting maybe as that is, but I have this wine. We use it for communion, but we're thinking about a different meal today. This year, Passover and Maundy Thursday are on the same day. On the same day, it would have been, or it is, this Thursday, this coming Thursday, April 9th, both Passover and Maundy Thursday on the same day. Now, I know you guys have done this before. You've talked about all these different foods that are part of Passover. So it's all review. But to think about wine, part of our Holy Communion, but also part of Passover. It was a celebration, wasn't it? They were leaving Egypt and slavery to the Egyptians to the promised land. Moses was finally leading them out. So it was a celebration, and they had wine. But they didn't want to forget this story. They didn't want to forget the suffering that they had done together as a people while they had been in Egypt. So they take salt and they put it in some water, and then they use that to dip, I think, both the hard-boiled eggs in and some some bitter herbs in, and they eat that. Oh, it's bitter. It's a bitter taste, but they taste the salt, like the tears that came out of their eyes when they were in slavery, to remember the pain and suffering that they had been in, and not to ever want to go back to that same slavery again. And then, surprisingly enough, both the Christian tradition of Easter and the Passover tradition of our Jewish brothers and sisters use eggs for the Passover celebration. Probably the same thing, same reason we would use eggs for Easter. They are a symbol of new life, of springtime. A couple warm days here after this rain, and it's going to get green. We know that is coming, even in the midst of this pandemic, that nothing's going to stop nature from becoming green and bringing leaves and green grass again. And the ducks that I see between here and Battle Lake every day out in the little ponds will build nests and lay eggs. And in a couple of weeks, I'll see those little ducks swimming behind their moms and dads in those ponds. It'll be ducks and geese, goslings, and small, I don't know what are they, is there a special name for baby swans? I don't know. If there is, I don't know it, but that's what we'll see. We'll see those true symbols of life that come from those eggs that those ducks and geese and swans will lay, the chickens lay, and we see those chicks come out of that. So we have those symbols that remind us of the things, the celebration of coming out of slavery, the tears that were cried while they were in slavery, the new life they will have in the promised land, and all the other symbolic things that come from these foods. And Jesus will choose two of them, won't he? The wine, and what we'll talk about maybe tomorrow or the next day, the unleavened bread as a part of the Holy Communion for us, as a way that we celebrate what Jesus wants us to remember, his death and resurrection. So as we go through this time, difficult time, not knowing answers, the darkness, I've already talked about that, all of those things that we don't know, to be reminded of things in the past. Just like when you gather together for that funeral of a saint, an elderly person in your family, and you can share and gather and have joy in the midst of that. Those same memories we can have now. Maybe this won't go down as one of our most memorable, might be most memorable, but one of our most fun Easters that we ever had as a family or as a congregation. We didn't enjoy it very much. We didn't get to celebrate. But we can remember previous Easters that we've had that, and that can give us that same joy and celebration that Jesus wants us to have as we gather together during this week, and then on Sunday morning again in the Spirit. And as we gather together through the Spirit on these videos in the next, we don't know how long it's going to be, but as long as we do that, I'm going to keep switching things back here. You might notice, he's got something different on the table today. He's got something different hanging up behind him. What happened to that cross? And I've had two different crosses up there, if you've noticed already. But let's start. Let's start today. What I'd like you to do, if you know the difference, maybe you'll have to wait till tomorrow and see what's different tomorrow. And then you can text or email me. But if you know, figured out what's different back there, just text me, write me an email. We can play a game and we can see who gets the most over the next 2 weeks of texting these in and say, oh, I know what you changed. I know what you changed, just for something fun. Give us a break from the mundane here. So I hope that this finds you well and safe, and we'll see you again this week.